Hey, this has been showing up on YouTube channels, outdoor channels and survival channels quite often now for the last couple of years. Basically, it's for making bowl shapes, carving out bowl shapes in bowls, cups, spoons, and people are carrying them into the wilderness so that they can improvise their own dishes and cutlery very easily. It's not too bad of a tool. It works, but it's got a couple of problems. And I'm going to show you something that might work a little better today. First, I want to sort of demonstrate this and show you what I perceive as some problems with it. So this is a piece of spruce, so it's medium hard, I would guess you would say, and it's out of our wood pile. I just flattened it with the hatchet, split it, and the way this works is this is the sharp edge here, and you just basically scoop stuff out. Now you can already see one problem, it's causing me actually to flinch here, is that generally the way you hold this, you have to pull it towards yourself all the time, and you have to pull it towards your hands that are hanging onto the piece of wood, so you got to be very careful with it, and you got to apply a lot of pressure, and that's the second problem with it. So I'm scooping stuff out here, but it's really hard to do, and this is pretty sharp. Actually, I can shave with this, so there's nothing wrong with how sharp it is. The problem is twofold. One, your handle's off to the side here, so you're not pushing directly into the carve with it. You're pushing off the side, so you got to put a lot of sort of extra side force on it. The other problem with it being that way is you can see I've had to like cinch right up on the handle with my finger here, and I'm already it's starting to look red. Eventually there's going to be a blister. If I've got to carve out a whole bowl here, this is going to get really uncomfortable. And so yeah, I mean, it works, but I think I have a better solution. So this is called a gouge. It's a carving gouge. Some people call it a straight gouge because some of them, they actually curve them into more of a bowl shape. I actually prefer them to be straight for this sort of thing. The main reason being is just the angle works better for me. This is very small, so that's kind of a bonus. It's even quite a bit smaller than this hook knife. And the way this works is this is the sharp edge here, and that's what does all the work. You don't use these edges at all, and you simply just push into the wood and it gouges out a piece. So what you have to be careful with this, you notice I'm not prying up on this. I'm going to come around and scoop these pieces out. That's because it's very easy to damage this tip here, actually snap it right off in places if you're prying. So you have to be very careful. If you do snap that off, and it's already happened with this one once or twice, you got to be prepared to file that down again and resharpen it. Maybe 3/8 of an inch across. Some of them are 3/4 of an inch or larger, and they can be quite a bit longer, but I like this for taking with me in the bush just because it's so small, and it's a good size. It scales up. You'll take a few more scoops when making big things like bowls, but it's actually worth it. It's less work on harder wood like this to use a smaller gouge. So you can see how quickly I'm getting this out, and that's because the main reason is because I'm able to push directly down into the carve with my hand. I'm not off to the side, so I can put a lot more force straight on there, and because it's a smaller surface cutting into the wood, it actually goes in a lot easier. And you can see with this, like once you get into a large bowl and you're cutting wider and wider swaths with this, this is a lot of surface area to be getting into a piece of hardwood, so it makes it very difficult. Where this, the pressure never changes. I hear a flicker. Northern flicker. You have that Star Trek-y phaser sound to him. Choo! Sounds like Mrs. Catnip is home. She knows what a northern flicker sounds like too. Right, Mrs. Catnip?
Yes.
can just get in there with lighter strokes now and take all those little pieces away that are sticking up there. I don't know what you call them, hills and valleys. That's what I'm going to call them. Professional amateur carver. Actually, I'm just a carve when I need to carver. Could even use that as a spoon right there without even smoothing the insides out. So what you can do, you can, like I say, you can take nice small cuts there, gouges, just to smooth it out. And then what I often do is I'll just find like a rough sandstone river rock, and I'll just spin it around in there and smooth it out a little more, just as though it was a fine file or a piece of sandpaper. So one really important consideration when choosing a tool to be used in the Great Wilds is whether or not it can be maintained. I think for most people that don't sharpen things on a regular basis, hook knives would be very difficult to maintain in the bush. This is a long curved surface, and without the proper tools and experience, I think someone would have a lot of trouble sharpening that consistently. On the other hand, a gouge can be sharpened with the exact same tool that I personally use for sharpening my knives and hatchets in the bush. And that is this, sort of. This is much larger than the one I usually take in the bush, but essentially the same thing. I've made one for the bush that's about, well, I'd say a quarter the size, and it's always in my backpack. All it is basically is a flat material, in this case a piece of aluminum I got from Home Depot, and sandpaper press glued to each side. So one side is 1200 grit sandpaper, and that is what I use for general purpose sharpening and maintenance for all my tools. And then the other side is 600 grit, and you can see I don't use it very often, and it's used for repairing nicks, small nicks, and getting the angles back onto edges. I'll maybe do a separate video on how I build these. I've got several different sizes I use for different things. And so the way I use these to sharpen this is very straightforward. What I'm looking for is an angle here that basically just doesn't quite dig into the sandpaper. And you can feel that as you go. You'll feel the drag, I would say, start to increase as you start to find this edge here when you're pushing. And also what I do is I rotate it along this axis as I'm sharpening, so I don't end up with a flat spot on the edge. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing it along, and I'm increasing the angle till I just about feel it digging in, and I'm rotating it on the axis while I do that. And that's all there is to it. Do it a few times that way, a few times rotating it back the other direction. And then when I'm done, if it is sharp enough to shave with, right there, then it's certainly sharp enough to carve with. So on the topic of maintenance, to protect this edge, I just have a piece of random hose. This is braided hose that I probably got at Princess Auto, I'm thinking, and I use it for various projects. And this is just a chunk I cut off that's maybe 1/4 of an inch longer than the blade itself on the gouge, and it just protects the gouge's edge and also protects everything else from getting cut by it. Works really well. It's got a bit of a natural curve in it from when it was rolled at the factory, and that tension that curve causes on here just holds it on perfectly well.